Hi, welcome to Tag Arcade. And in today's tutorial, we are going to be talking about arrays. So if you like this tutorial and would like to show your support, go to www.tagarcade.com and click on this nice button on the top right-hand corner. So let's go ahead and open up Unity 3D and let's go back to our tutorial project. So while this is loading up, I'm just going to talk very briefly about what are arrays. So arrays are pretty much a collection of data types. And we're going to go ahead and reopen our loop script. And we are going to do things the long way to show you what an array is and how to use it. So let's say we want to have a collection of objects. And in this example, we are going to get the x position of all of our enemy positions. So I'm just going to do 3 of them for now. So we're just going to do float x position 1, float x position 2, float x position 3. And then we're going to set each of these to our initial positions. So we're going to say x position 1 equals negative 45. Because our first position is at negative 45. Our second one, so I'm just going to copy this to save myself some typing. So we're going to say 2 is negative 35, and 3 is going to be negative 25. Finally, we're going to do debug.log. Let's see, x. We'll say, oops, having a little typing problem. X position 1 plus x position, did I not do plus? X position 1. So x position 1 colon parentheses plus x position 1. We're going to copy this 2 more times, and we're going to say 2, 2, 3, and 3. So we're going to go File, Save, and let's go ahead and play this. Oops, apparently I hit pause by accident. There we go. So here we got our 3 x positions, negative 45, negative 35, negative 25. So, with an array is going to start not at 1, but an array is actually going to start at 0. So, let's go ahead and change these around a little bit. So, let's go say 0, 1, 2. And we're going to change our output to x position 0, 1, 2, and do it 1, 2. So when you create an array, then an array is going to start at 0, and it's going to go, well, and it's going to increase by 1 every time. So x position 0, 1, 2. So we're going to hit File, Save, and let's go ahead and play this just to make sure everything still works. And we got x position 0, 1, 2. So now that you understand the basic concepts of arrays, we are going to create the array now. So in our array, all you have to do, or to declare an array, all you have to do is put brackets after the data type. So in this case, we're going to go float bracket x position. Now to access each position, we're going to put a bracket around the numbers. So x position bracket 0, x position bracket 1, and x position bracket 2. Oops. And once again, after we put all our bracket, nothing should be read anymore. And we could now hit File, Save, and run our project. Or run our script, I should say. And I have an error message because I am probably missing a bracket somewhere. So let's go ahead and see what line is made the mistake. Oh, apparently for the second line I put the bracket in the wrong spot. Okay. So once again, yep. Where did I mess up? Oh, okay. Now, it is not simply enough to say float bracket x position. You then have to sort of create it. So what we're going to say is we're going to tell the compiler x position equals new float that has 3 spots, 3 data types. In our case, 0, 1, 2. Let's try this again. Hit file play. And here you go. We have our positions, negative 45, negative 35, negative 25. Okay, so what happens if you sort of forget that it starts at 0, 1, 2? What if you do 1, 2, 3? As when I started programming, I used to do this a lot. I was like, oh, I'm creating 3 positions, and we're going to start 1, 2, 3. So if you hit play, what do you get? You are going to get an error message that says index out of range exception. Array index is out of range. So yeah, that means that when you create your array, it's going to start at 0, it's going to go up to 2, and when you try to access the 3rd position, it's going to give you an error message. In this case, the index out of range. So just remember that if you get that index out of range error message, is because you are trying to access an array that is simply not there. So just remember, when you declare a variable, like say 3, you start at 0, and your maximum is 1 less than your max. So since I got 3, 1 less than 3 is 2. So position 2 is going to be my last position. Okay, so now that we understand the arrays, the reason why arrays are powerful is you get to put these into loops. So let's go ahead and comment out this line of code. And since we got 10 enemy objects, we are going to change our number here to 10. So x position equals new float 10. Now at the bottom, we are going to say x position 0 equals enemy position, which will hold our x position, dot x. And we're going to copy our debug.log. And we're going to say 0. Okay. So file save. Well, actually, before I hit play, do you know what's going to happen? Okay, so when we hit play, we have our x position 0, but all of these are x position 0. And it is getting the x position of all our enemy objects, but it's actually storing it still in x position 0. So that's not quite right, or not quite what we want to do. So we know an array position starts at 0 and gets increased by 1 every time. So which variable in our script sort of starts at 0 and increments 1 each time? Well, our enemy counter starts at 0, and after each loop, it increases 1 each time. So we are going to use the enemy counter to reference our array. In this case, it's our array of x positions. And because I want my x positions to change, I am going to simply put enemy counter in between my output, my brackets, or not my brackets, my quotation marks. So when we do file save and hit play, we are going to get X position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. At negative 35, 25, 15, 5, negative 5, 5, 15, so on and so forth. Okay, so that is an array. Of course, you don't need to keep track of the X position because, well, it's actually part of the transform, so we don't have to worry about that. So the more practical use of using an array is to do something else. So let's make pretend I have more than one enemy type. So let's pretend we're doing Galaxian, Galaga, or Space Invader, where we have all these enemies types and they're going to be advancing down on the player. So what I did is I did transform bracket enemy to show that we're going to have more than one enemy type. So for time's sake, I am going to create my new enemy type, which is going to be simply a cube. Simple enough, right? So we're going to position our cube at 0, 0, 0. Going to create a new prefab. And this prefab is going to be called enemy, we'll say enemy 2. And let's drag our cube into it. Hey, come on, cube. Cube, enemy. Come on. Okay. Let's delete this. Yes. Oops. File delete. And let's go ahead and create our cylinder. Why not? And let's make this our new prefab. And we'll call this enemy 3. I don't know why that keeps on happening. Now I know why. Because every time I let go of the mouse, for some reason, I am moving my cursor upwards. Okay, so we have our first enemy type, our second, which is just a block, and our third, which is just a cube, or not a cube, a cylinder. And when I looked at my script, you notice at the bottom, you get an error message. So the reason why you get an error message is because when you're creating your enemy type, you gotta say which enemy type we're gonna create. So we're gonna say enemy bracket 0, close bracket. Because when we first created it, or when we first went to our array, we only created our first enemy type. So let's hit play. Let's make sure we get our 10 enemies, and we have an index out of range error. So why do we have an index out of range error? Well, we did access the enemy 0, and that's because since we placed our transform up here, we never initialized our transform. So, to initialize our transform that is exposed to Unity in the editor, we are going to change it on the scripts. So let's go to scripts, let's go to loops, and under enemy size, we're going to say 3. So we're going to drag in our enemy type 1, our enemy type 2, and our enemy type 3. Let's hit play. And we have our 10 enemies of our first enemy type. So, do you know how to create our other 2 enemy types and position it onto the screen? Well, we're just going to copy and paste the script that creates our enemy types. And we're going to say 0 for the first one, 1 on the second grouping, and 2 for the third grouping. Let's do file save, and let's see what's going to happen. Well, we have all our enemy types, but our enemy types are just keep on going to the right. So we don't want it to keep on going to the right. We want our new enemy types to be below the first enemy types. So down here and down here. Which means we have to reset the positions. So let's go ahead and copy this. And we don't want our enemy types to be literally on top of each other. We want it to be slightly below. So let's decrease the Z position to maybe 15 and 5. So we'll do file save. We'll hit play. And there we go. We have our 3 rows of enemy. So now I could go ahead and try to shoot down each row of enemies while they advance down on my position. So the camera's a little bit too close. So let's go ahead and zoom out the camera. So let's go get the camera. Where are you? There you are. And let's just... Is that camera? No, that's my directional light. There's my camera. And just zoom it out just a little bit more. We have an extra cylinder here, so let's go ahead and delete that. And when we hit play, it's still a little, because I got some cubes and stuff chopped off, so let's go ahead and back. Zoom out a little bit, pan it back a little bit more, hit play. Wow, these things are really off to the side. Okay. Way back. Play. There we go. We have our 3 enemy types. Okay. Stop. Stop. Okay, now let's look at our line of code. If you notice our line of code, we are pretty much duplicating these lines of codes in order to create our 3 enemy types on the field. So in programming, you should never ever duplicate code. So if you duplicate code, it means you're doing something wrong or something a little off. So let's go ahead and make this more programmer friendly. So when we talk about positions, we have our rows. We have our columns. In here, we have our columns, and we have our 3 rows. I don't know what I just did, so I'm just going to undo that. So we have our 3 rows. 1, 2, 3. So let's go ahead and change the name of this to be a little bit more representative of what we have. So we have enemy positions. Well, we'll say enemy column positions. And now everything is going to turn bright red, which is a good thing, because we are going to go to each of these red spots and change the name to enemy column positions. Okay. Now, we actually going to need a second variable. And our second variable, if you haven't guessed it by now, is enemy row positions. And what we're going to do is at the very beginning, we are going to say enemy column position equals enemy row positions. Hit file save. And okay, so that enemy counter turned bright red because I forgot my semicolon. Now that we do that, we are going to have 3 rows. So, since we're going to have 3 rows, we are going to say for int enemy rows equals 0. Enemy rows less than 3. Enemy rows plus plus. Okay. Finally, at the end, we're going to say enemy rows, because we have to increase the rows by 10 each time. So we go from 25 to 15 to 5. So we're going to say enemy rows plus equals new vector 3, 0, 0, 10. Well, we actually have to decrease the rows by 10 each time. So instead of instead of saying plus equals, we're going to say minus equals. Okay, and now we have to say our column positions is going to be the same as our row positions. Okay, file save, and we actually have to comment these other lines of codes because we don't want two sets of enemies on rows 2 and 3. So we hit file, sorry, so we hit Unity 3D, try to hit play, we can't because, why can't we do it? New vector 3, 0, comma 0, comma 10. So what's wrong with you? Let's see. Let's look at our message. Operator minus equals cannot be applied to an operator of type int. Yeah. So instead of using enemy rows, instead of using enemy rows position, I used enemy rows. Oops. So yeah, sorry about that. Hit file play. And okay, so we created 3 rows of our first enemy type. We completely forgot to change our enemy type that we displayed on the screen. So on our first row of enemies, we want to be type 0. And every time we get to the second row, we want to change our enemy type. So we're going to say enemy bracket enemy rows. Because we're going to start at 0 with the first row, we need to be 1 on the second row and 2 on the third row. So we got to say enemy bracket enemy rows. Let's hit file save, hit play, and hopefully we get our 3 different types of enemies. We do. We got our first enemy types, the second one, and the third. And there you have it. That is arrays. So we used an array, in our case our enemy types, to create 3 rows of enemies in script. And to be honest, we only added another for loop, probably another position, and yeah, modified the transform to be an array. So with a little bit extra code, we created 3 rows of enemies. So that's the power of an array. So if you like this tutorial, like, subscribe, and all that other good stuff. And until next time, have fun and keep on creating games.